Yeah, you owned a lumber company.
Yeah,
did you?
London Lumber
Yeah.
and also Hyatt Brothers Construction.
Well, there was a gentleman that I talked to last week who lived out on Hamilton Road, and he was recalling as a youngster um, going skating among the lumber piles.
Yeah, yeah. We had my dad encouraged us to get the gang of the boys around, and we got a hockey club together. Oh, and that was on Egerton Street, and then we moved out to Hamilton Road afterwards and had the skating rink out there on Hamilton Road and Madison Ave.
Oh yeah,
This was elementary school.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and we formed a hockey team naturally and
Now,
played hockey.
The rink was like just a homemade rink with boards around it, or?
Mm-hmm. And he said, you can have the light, you can have the water, you can have the land. You do the work, you boys.
Who was this?
My father.
Oh, it was
Yeah.
on his property?
Yeah, it was on our property.
I see.
And it was on our property, on his property on Hamilton Road.
Mm-hmm.
And I can always remember one thing that the seasons seem to be more uniform than they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to have to work very hard to get skating for Christmas. Then we'd have skate the new year out, the new year in, the old year out.
Mm-hmm.
And this day, it was quite a bit behind, and so the fellas come over, about 5 of the fellas come over at the house, and Dad was very strict, and he made the whole 5 of us sit in the house until 1 minute after 12, and then he said, okay, go to work. Couldn't work on Sunday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we got the ice all right, but we had to stay up all night and flood.
Yeah, after midnight.
After midnight. 1 minute after midnight, why you could go to work.
So the rules in those days were a little more strict. I
Oh yeah,
suppose, were
and I guess on an average night there was no charge for it. It was just neighbors, and as a matter of fact, some of them came from quite a distance. But on an average night, we'd have about 100 there skating.
Really?
Mostly elementary.
Yeah. Now, can you give me a location, or again, you say Madison Ave?
Madison, well, the first one was on Egerton Street, where we had our lumberyard at 288 Egerton, at the rear of 288 Egerton.
Okay.
And then we moved out to Madison, 809 Hamilton Road. That's on Madison and Hamilton Road.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had the rink there for about 3 years. Then we got a little older and didn't have the same crew around. And then there was the Grand Trunk rink on Egerton Street, where the junkyard is. It used to be, I forget the name right now. I knew him quite well. Up on Egerton and Grafton. And then in the early days,
before our rink, or just after our rink, I'm not sure just which, there was a Penn Warden skating rink up on Hamilton Road across from Redan on the north side of Hamilton Road.
No, Penn Warden, what's that?
Well, they were known, I think they were in the garage business, and it was called the Garland. It was an outdoor rink too. And then of course the arena came down here, came along on Bathurst Street,
Mm-hmm.
and then we got some real bad weather for outside skating rinks, and then most of us gravitated down there. I skated down there for years.
Oh, is that right? Now, Penn Warden, I didn't quite, what does that mean? Is that a person's name? or-
Person's name, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, Miss Penn Warden kept a stationery store, the last store in the block on the corner of Rectory and Hamilton Road for years and years and years. She'd never married, and she kept a stationery store. You could buy candy and books, and that's for school. And it was her brother's.
Penwar.
D-E-N, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure where they live, but we knew Penn Warden's store, and we knew Penn Warden's rink, which was called the Garland.
Mm.
It was a fairly big rink, too.
Now, I was speaking with a lady who lived in the old Homister house there. The
Oh,
hotel.
Watson?
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, they said she said they had a rink there too. Did everybody build their own rinks in the city?
Well, no, but a lot of them did. A lot
So
of them
there
did.
were a
See,
lot
they
of-
didn't have the recreation from public utilities.
Sure.
That came afterwards.
That's true.
And there was her and her brother. Her name was May, and
Yeah.
his name was Jim Watson. I don't know whether were you talking to
I
her
was
recently?
speaking to Albert Watson and May both. Albert was her
Son.
cousin.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Oh,
cousin.
I don't know.
'Cause-
There was
'cause
May.
May's father was Albert's uncle, so that was her cousin.
Yeah, well, he was a missionary in India, and he opened a shoe store where the old Homister house was, which was just east of Trafalgar School. And he had the boy and the girl. May was the elder, and Jim. I went to school with Jim, and they did have a rink down there, Watson's rink. Yeah, it's quite right.
Yeah, so as a youngster, maybe we'll just keep it. When were you born? Like how old are you now?
Born 1906,
So you're
83 going on 84 now.
So your memories of London would go back to before the war, and
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So if we could stick into that with that time period as a youngster,
I was too young to go to the war, the First
Yeah.
World War,
yeah,
and too old on the second one.
yeah, yeah.
They wouldn't let me in.
But what do you remember as a child, other than we were talking about entertainment? How was life different? How did your parents?
Well, our parents were,
treat you?
my parents, and I think most parents were reasonably strict. We were fortunate or unfortunate. I think we were fortunate. Our lumber yard was located at 288 Egerton Street, and it would be roughly, I would say, an acre. So we had all kinds of games, and we were, as long as we behaved ourselves, we were quite welcome to invite the neighborhood boys in and that. So we had about cowboys and Indians and that, and we had about an acre to play in, all in lumber yards, and plenty of places to hide and so forth and so on. Your shoes shined on Saturday. No funny papers on Sunday, and if your shoes weren't shined on Saturday, you went to church and Sunday school without shoes shined because you couldn't shine them on Sunday.
So your job was to shine your shoes every Saturday.
My own.
Your own
Yeah,
shoes.
I had two brothers,
Right.
and they were supposed to be done. My dad was, and his four brothers were in a construction company. The office is right next door to our house. It's 290 Egerton Street, and I was about 20, 21, 20. I think I was 21, 22 when my dad died, and I'd been to one picnic and two shows with him. Every night after he came in for dinner right next door to the house. Then he'd go back and he'd work after. As a matter of fact, he killed himself. He died about 52 from overwork. And so my mother was really a dad and a mother too.
So these rules about shining your shoes, and then you said no comics on Sunday.
No.
Like, you on Sunday had to maintain.
Sunday
a
was
certain-
Sunday.
Sunday was
Yeah.
Sunday. Yeah. So what about school? What school did you go to?
Right from kindergarten right up to grade 8 Chesley Ave, which is right now, torn down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that also very strict in those days? Like, do you
Yeah,
remember-
we had a principal by the name of E. Gibbs. Have you heard that yet?
Yeah.
He was a real man. He would cry in class. Something would happen that's sad. If he gave somebody the strap that they broke a rule and they had the strap, he would cry and the tears would run down his eyes while he was given the strap. But as far as a man was concerned, he was a real gentleman. Yeah, he was. I went through the school with him and had him for grade 8 when I went out of school. No, he was a real gentleman. But there are 2 or 3 things that it's funny, you never forget them. He always used to say to the girls, "Now, when you get older," he said, "don't you let anybody get you into these tight corsets. It's bad for you. You can't breathe in that." That was one thing. And the other thing he said, "It doesn't matter what you do or how hard you try. There are 2 things that you're going to have to do when you go through life. You'll get death, and you'll get taxes. You can't miss them." And, they impressed you at the time because, you were only in grade 8. That's a long, long time ago. Death and taxes, he said, you can't miss them. Doesn't matter who you are or who your parents are. And it's true.
Were there any particular incidents that you remember in those 8 years at elementary school that stood out, like a classroom incident or with the other kids?
Well, one thing was clothes. I remember we had one fellow by the name of Zela Beam. He was about 6 foot in grade 8.
What was his
And
name?
he wore what you would call today +4s. They weren't pants or they weren't shorts, but they came down a bloomer type, down to the leg. But I remember one of the days that you were proud of when you left home. But oh, it was awful the first day of school when you put your first pair of long pants on and you don't see any short pants anymore. And this would be in about grade 7 or 8 when it came out. And oh, you were teased by the girls and by the boys when you put your first pair of long pants on.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So the boys in grade 7 and 8 wore long pants, but below that they wore the bloomer type?
I think they used to call them blue. They used to come down just below the
Yeah,
knee,
yeah,
and then you had
yeah.
your stocking. Yeah, that seemed to be the usual thing. Some of them would put off until they got into grade 8, and they would really get a razzing then when they put the bloomer pants on.
The long pants.
When they put the long pants
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
from the bloomer pants.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, yeah.
What about the girls? Was there a similar?
No, I don't think so. I don't think their dress changed an awful lot, excepting when they were exercising out in the yard. They wore what they call gym bloomers, which was about a little fuller than the boys were, and they come down elastic around the knee. But and you'd see them. There's quite a few older girls teams in London, like McCormick's and Kellogg's, and that. They had these softball teams, and they would more or less wear them, and they'd be girls around 18, 24, and they would wear these bloomer pants for running.
Do you remember your parents taking you or you going anywhere in London when you were young before the war that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, one show with my dad, The Birth of a Nation.
Can you tell me about what you remember about that day?
Well, he was too busy. He was always at work next door in the office. But I remember roughly the picture. It really thrilled me because we didn't go to the shows. There was only 3 or 4 shows in London. I don't know whether you've heard of them or not. There was a Star Show up on Richmond Street. There was the Unique, which was out Dundas Street, just east of Adelaide, and then our firm built the Patricia where the Bell Telephone Building was on Clarence Street, and it was built as a dance hall for quite a while, and then apparently it wasn't. Our people didn't run it; somebody else ran it, but they built it. And then apparently they turned it into a motion picture show, and it showed pictures for several years. And it was run by Billy Stewart. Billy Stewart ran the Rex, which was out on Hamilton Road, and then he he closed the Rex or sold the Rex, I'm not sure which. Then he ran the Patricia for a few years, and then eventually it was torn down and the Bell Telephone built.
Is that Bell Telephone at the corner of Clarence and?
Right behind Cairn Cross. Used to be Cairn Cross and Lord.
Yeah, it's a parking lot now.
Yeah, now it is.
Yeah,
Between AFCO building.
Right. What show did you see the Birth of a Nation in? Do you remember?
The Birth of a Nation was in. God, now that's a good one because it wouldn't have been the Capitol because I was in high school when the Capitol was opened.
Lowe's.
In Lowe's.
Majestic. There was Majestic down there too.
It must have been, and I don't think it was a Majestic. It was the old Majestic, and it might have been the Grand. It might have been the Grand that showed up because, as I say, I remember quite well when, because one of the boys got the job as an usher in, not one of my brothers, but got the usher in Allen's when it was opened. And of course they had the big organ in Allen's, and it was something to go. And as far as Lowe's were concerned, my dad forbid us to go to Lowe's because he was on a committee, and they condemned the roof. I think if I remember rightly, the committee said that they had glazed tile, and the roof was bearing on the glazed tile, and this was dangerous. So we could not go to Lowe's. Not on account of the shows that were there, but on account of the building being unsafe. But I don't think they did anything to it, and I think maybe the committee were wrong because I don't ever remember anything being done to it.
Maybe it's still there.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's still there. Yeah.
It would be the Century.
Yeah, something like that. It's changed, but it was Lowe's and Capitol.
Yeah. So you didn't go elsewhere in London, like as a youngster? Did you go on a picnic anywhere that you remember, or did they take you shopping downtown that you
Oh,
remember?
my dad never went shopping. No,
Mhm.
no. Well, no, we had as a matter of fact, we had a grocery store right across from where we lived on Egerton Street, Fred McDonald's grocery store.
Mhm.
And there was well, I wouldn't say there was no shopping uptown. My mother would shop for clothes and that,
Mhm.
but groceries and that, you went across the road and
Mhm.
got it.
Mhm.
And McDonald, Fred McDonald run it. His parents lived down on the corner of Ormsby and Egerton Street, and his father worked for us as a teamster. But the thing I remember about it, he didn't have a phone, and he used to come over. We were the only ones on the street that had a phone, and there were not many houses on there.
Mhm.
And
Is this
he
before
came,
the war?
Hmm?
Before the war?
Oh yes, this would be before the war,
Okay.
long before the war.
Okay.
And every time he came over the phone, my dad said he wanted to pay. My dad said, "Oh, forget about it." He said, "You're welcome to use it."
Mhm.
So what Fred did, he was a single fella, he brought me over candy. Well, I developed stomach trouble or something or other anyway, and the doctor said he must not have candy. So he came over one day and he offered me the candy. I said, "No, thank you. I'm only a little guy. No, thank you." And he said, "Why, what's the matter?" He said, "Are you mad at me?" And I remember saying, "No, I'm not mad at you, but I can't take your candy." And he said, "Well, tell me why." And I said, "Well, my mother said you charge it on her bill."
Oh, no.
And I got a wailing after he left. But that was the only way she could get me to say no. I wouldn't take it.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to visualize, or how can I visualize London before 1914? I guess you didn't get around too much because you were young and your parents were working.
Well,
so-
1914, the Oxford line, which serviced Hamilton Road, pulled in and went down Egerton Street, a quarter of a block, and backed up by the Hamilton Road Presbyterian Church, and away she went back uptown. That was that was
Street
before 1914, and then they had the open back streetcars where you got on the back, and the back was open. They let the smoke out there. You had to pay your fare just the same, and the Oxford went up to Richmond Street, up Horton Street, up to Richmond Street up to Oxford Street, and Oxford Street up to Adelaide Street, and turned up Adelaide, back down south on Adelaide, and then back down over the same route again. That was the Oxford. That was the line that we knew. And then the next change was to St. Julian Street, and then from St. Julian Street they took it out to when the buses come on to Pine Lawn Circle, and Pine Lawn Circle, they went out to Highbury Ave. And of course, now I don't know how far they go out.
So, what do you remember about as a kid? Did you have cars? Like, were there automobiles many automobiles on the street?
Yeah, my dad, he wasn't the first one to have an automobile, but he bought a business car. We didn't get a family car for it until years later. But the business car, which was an Oakland, you cranked it, and it had the supports down from the roof down to the front fenders, and it had one of these air horns. You press the bulb, and then eventually after that, why, they did get a business car, which was a Buick, four-cylinder Buick, and then the old Oakland car became a truck for the company, and they changed from horses over to the truck. Then.
What year would the Oakland be?
Well, that'd be. Oh, I don't know. I would suppose that would be 1906, and about 12. I would say it'd be maybe about 1917 or 18.
Mhm.
That'd be my guess. I wouldn't guarantee that, but that'd be my guess.
So your family, or you didn't have access to a car before World War One, basically.
Well, we didn't get many rides, and it was for the business.
They had it though.
They had
1906 on?
Pardon?
They had the car from what year on?
Well, I would say that it would be about somewhere around 1910, 1912.
Oh, okay.
And then they run it as a business car.
Mhm.
We didn't get out many rides on it.
No, so you didn't take the car downtown?
Oh God, no. No, although I did take the car downtown. I had been driving. I learned to drive on the truck, and I took the car downtown in 1913. 1906. I guess I'd be about 1918, 1919. And only with my dad. Drove him around. He was he ran the office. The other three brothers were out in the job.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, one day when I was out of him, we were stopped by a policeman, and he said to my dad, he said, "How old is he?" And he said, "Well," he said, "he's pretty nearly 14." God, he said, he can't drive a car without a license. And my dad said, "Well, I never heard about that before." He said, he's not allowed to drive it unless I'm with him. Well, he said, "You have to have a license." Well, Dad knew Burl, as Chief Burl. And we went up there, and he said, "Yeah, that's all right, Hyatt, but just forget about it." He said, send the license and get the license away. He said, "He's under 16, so you'll have to have a chauffeur's license." So I got this chauffeur's license when I was 14.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
The police chief was Burrell, B-U-R-R-E-L-L?
B-I-R-R.
Oh, B-I-R-R.
Yeah, Burl. B-I-R-R-E-L-L.
Oh, I
And then after he came, I think they used to call him Hank. Downs. Downs was the next man.
Oh, I see.
And then after Downs, I forget who the other fellow was. Downs was a detective for a while, and then they made him chief.
Oh, yeah. So now this driving license business, did they have to take tests, or did you just go and buy one, or how did that work?
No, I think I went through a test, and of course
Yeah.
the traffic wasn't as heavy, and I had no problem. I got it. The only thing is that the policeman that stopped me with my dad, he had it in for me. I guess he didn't like it because we didn't get the summons, because he stopped me, and I used to wear it. I wear it in the belt, see. And of course, when I was lifting cement blocks at the yard, we made cement blocks at the yard, and the industry scratched it all. "Where's your paper?" Oh, I said, "I haven't got the paper. I haven't got the paper, sir." I said, "But that's my button. I gave you a button." And he said, "Well, you got to carry the paper. You haven't got your license with you." No, I said, "I haven't got the paper license," because I said, I'm just in work clothes. I went uptown for something my dad asked me to do, up to one of the architects or something other. And he said, "Well," he said, "I got to write you out a summons." I said, "Well, you go ahead." I said, I haven't got it, so I can't do anything about it."
This is the same
Well, I
guy?
think, huh?
This is the same guy from...
Yeah, the same fellow that pinned it at the first, and I think he was kind of, I figured he had it in for me, see. Another thing that, when I first got my license, that I never did forget, I read the book, and I wasn't a speed demon. I really followed the rules. And I was up at the corner of Richmond and Dundas Street around Christmas time, and going along, and looking at the speedometer like that, and this big burly policeman from the side, "Come on, Santa Claus, hurry up and get going." Because it was 10 miles an hour then, at an intersection. The intersections were different.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they were different than around the road. They don't do that nowadays, but
How
when
did
you
that-
come to an intersection, it was 10 miles an hour.
You had to slow down from what?
Before
20?
you entered the intersection, and keep it down until after you got your car over the intersection.
And what was the rest of the street?
20.
20. Is that
And then it went up shortly after that to 25.
in the 20s, 1920s, or?
Oh, yeah, it must have been around about that time.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? I never heard that before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how did these policemen stop you? Were they on a...
No, he was walking along the sidewalk, and I had the car parked there, and I'd been someplace for an errand for my dad, and got into the car, and he said,
Yeah. So policemen never went around in those days on any vehicle or anything.
no, it was after that, then the motorcycle come, and then there was Red Monahan on the old motorcycle. Surely you've heard about
Oh.
him. Oh, Red. Red was known by any number of Americans down in the States. Reg was the first one, Red Monahan, and then there was, I forget his name now. Nolte. Nolte was the second one. There was two policemen here for a lot of years. But you talk to somebody down in Kentucky, "Oh, I know that guy up at your place." And he caught me out by going out towards Crumlin. Yeah, he was noted all over, Red Monahan.
And what did they do? Hide in the bushes or what?
No, he had a motorcycle.
Oh.
A motorcycle, but you went 20 mile an hour, and if you went 21, you got it.
And would this be in the 1920s? Or 30s? Or...
1920, let me see. I'd be around about 16, 19, 20. It'd be in the 1920s, I guess,
Yeah.
because I'd be about 16 at the time, and we watched for him. And I might be out on some of my dates,
Yeah,
because it's awful hard
I
to
know.
pin them.
Yeah. Like, would you? I'm doing a little section on characters in London, and I suppose he would qualify as people that
Oh,
were
you wouldn't leave him out not if you showed it to him the whole
what
time.
else was there about him that you can tell me?
Well, he was very fair. He was very fair, but he was precise.
Okay.
And it didn't matter whether you were Mr. Somebody or whether you were Johnny Nobody.
Yeah.
He treated them all alike.
Yeah.
You couldn't come up to him and say, well, here's a cigar, forget it.
So
No,
he would follow you on a motorcycle and clock you. They didn't have radar or anything. He would
no,
follow
just
you.
absolutely clocking.
Yeah, he would.
On a motorcycle, yeah. And that's a Harley Davidson. The two first police vehicles were Harley Davidsons.
And Nolte is spelled how?
Noltie.
Oh, okay. So they were the scourge of the streets.
Yeah, but more red seemed to be more of a character because after when I was older, and quite a bit older, and went down to the States on vacations and that, they say London, Ontario. Oh, you're from Red Monahan. I don't know what his first name was really because that's what he was called by, Red Monahan.
How much would a ticket cost in those days if you got one?
Oh, I think $5. Yeah.
That's fun. What about? Were there any other different things on the streets that you recall early on?
Yeah, I was going to school. I worked on the first traffic light in the city of London on the corner of Dundas and Richmond Street. There was a ladder going up a steel column which supported it, and a policeman went up there and he turned it on by hand and he turned it off by hand and turned the directions by hand. And that was the first time. I think I was going to school at the time, but anyway, we couldn't start work before 11 o'clock at night. And that was the first time, of course, we weren't allowed out a lot at nights and that. But it was the first time that I knew there was nightlife in the city of London because at 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning, the cars were going up Dundas. The lights weren't operating, but the cars were going up and down that street, and we'd scratch our heads and say, well, where in the hell have they been at this time of the morning? Yeah. So I had the honor of working on this thing. It was a little house about, to be about 3'6", because they had to come up through a hole in the floor, up the ladder, up the pole, up the floor, and it'd be about 3'6" square, and from about 2'6" up was all windows, so that he had, and then he could open the windows, and if you weren't doing the thing right, but you'd come down to Dundas and Richmond and make a left-hand turn. As long as you put your hand out, there was no lights then, but as long as you put your hand out, you make a left-hand turn.
This light was electric light, though.
It's just the same as the stoplights today.
Okay, but the person in the booth was switching it on and off.
On and off, yeah. He had like a controller like they had on their old London Street railways. It was worked like a rheostat. They changed the speeds with him, And he had, like it was a long handle like that.
He would judge according to the traffic, would he?
Yeah, if there's a big line up, he'd put it. There was no timing.
Was he there all day or just at busy times?
I would say it was around about 7 o'clock in the morning until about 12 at night. I think he went off.
Again, would this be in the 20s, do you think?
Yeah, that'd be at the same time.
I see. Now, who were you working for when you did this?
My own firm, Hyatt Brothers. Not my own, but my father's. Hyatt Brothers Limited.
So you did electrical.
They were builders and contractors.
I see, but you also could do electrical work. Was that?
Well, no, they sublet that.
So you were building the actual.
Yeah, the actual thing. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
How long would that have lasted? How long would that have lasted for 10 years or? Was that a long time?
I don't think it was much.
I suppose they would have got signalized.
Much more than about 8 years before they started to multiply the signals, and that was the traffic box that was put up. The rest, then they went into controlling them.
Was the light hanging right in the middle of the street?
Yes, yes. Not on the sides like they have now. There's one light in the center of the street.
So it was kind of like right across. Cross wires or whatever.
Cross wires on them.
I see. Yeah. Were London streets paved in those days? Or was it?
Hammond Road wasn't when I was around. When we lived on Egerton Street, first in my school days, and another laughable incident. The Hammond Road wasn't paved at all, and the wife's father came over from England, and he looked after a bunch of horses over there, and the ladies of the house that he was working for dispensed with the horses and didn't want him to be out of the job. They sent him to a driving school. So he came over here and he drove the first truck in the city of London for McClary's. And he used to come up Adelaide Street in the mud, and he'd hit the street railway tracks, and they were solid tires, they weren't pneumatic, and he'd get into the tracks, and that there was a double switch or a double line, double track down at the LMPS on Horton Street where Horton takes a bend, and the streetcar would wait until he got up and got on that side before they come and let him. That's how muddy it was. And they weren't in a hurry in those days.
Yeah.
But they were more like wagon wheels with solid rubber tires, and that they just fit into the tracks.
Yeah.
Really
So
nicely.
you couldn't get out until he got to a certain
that's
point.
right.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
And then another thing that I remember, you may be not interested in this, but I have stood in front of the old city hall a number of times and watched McCormick's baseball team play on a field across the road where Hotel London was,
Mhm.
with bleachers. They had bleachers for,
Okay.
yeah.
So that was the ballpark where City Center is today.
Pardon?
Where City Center
Where
is
City
today.
Center is today, yeah.
That's something.
Yeah, and when I go by, I sometimes can't believe it because there'd be this crowd sitting in the bleachers, you know, and they'd have the wire fence so the ball wouldn't come out. And it was mostly girls. I never saw any fellas playing there. Most girls softballs, and regular teams, regular league.
Did you ever go to see the Tecumsehs play at all down in the Tecumseh
Not
Park?
so much. I wasn't ever interested in baseball. I was in hockey, and I used to go when they had the international league here. They used to play on the Jubilee rink on Lyle Street.
Oh, I
The
heard
Jubilee rink on Lyle Street is right on the site of the present curling club.
Mhm. So that was the arena used before the London arena. Bathurst.
Well, I never allowed it for skating that I know of, except the hockey games were there, and I believe they did some curling. But I was quite. I shouldn't say I was quite a skater, but I liked skating real well because we had it at the office at the house. But I can't ever remember skating on this Jubilee rink. But this Jubilee rink had the high boards like a hockey, and you sat down below, and then they also had boxes up top. Because when things didn't go right, they'd throw the chairs from the boxes right onto the ice.
No.
Yeah, that's right across from where the old car barns were.
Yeah. But the International League teams played there, and then later they played in the London arena on Bathurst.
Yeah, I think they did for a little while, not very long. But there was Cleveland and Cleveland, I think, and Buffalo, and the London Tecumseh, and over here where Canada Trust is on Elmwood and Wortley. Elmwood and Wortley. I think it was Eric Pettinger who was a player. He had a gas station there. After he finished his hockey days, he ran a gas station there. And of course, when you were young, it was great to be able to go up and talk to a fellow that was, really played really professional hockey.
So, do you remember any particular games or any incidents there of hockey that you say they threw chairs and things like that?
Yeah, no, I wasn't in. I wasn't in. They say it was an awful mess. I wasn't in when they did that, but
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. I saw quite a few. I think there was. I can't remember all the players' name, but I think Bellevue, not Bellevue, but I think it was something like Bellevue, only it was spelt with an F. He was one of the players in that, and I believe Toronto was in on it too. There was about, I think, 6 teams or 7 teams. But we did go down and see baseball, and took our kids down to see baseball when the London Majors were playing here. But baseball never attracted me like hockey.
That must have been really something to have a professional hockey team in London. I mean, that.
Oh yeah,
It must
yeah.
have been good hockey.
I don't know if they paid them very well or not, but I think they had to earn a bit of a living someplace else than that. But they were really players, really good players.
Do you remember, Evan, I've people that I've talked to about that team, do you remember the colors of the uniforms? The team colors? I've seen pictures with a big T on it, I think.
Yeah, it seems to me they were blue and gold, and I wouldn't swear to that. But it seems to me the T was a gold and the background was a blue. But I wouldn't swear to that, though.
And somebody else said they thought it was a blue and red, so I think we have the blue right anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. What about other forms of technology? We were talking about the car coming in and the street lights coming in. Do you remember as you grew up and so on, other firsts in your life of new technology coming in that kind of impressed you?
Well, yeah, I remember as far as London is concerned, I was older then though, and we were building the big addition at the Kelvinator at the back, and that's when Ready Mix came to London, Ready Mix Concrete from the old cement mixer, and the gang of men shoveling gravel in and putting cement in.
When was that?
That'll be. I don't know. It's pretty hard to figure these things
I,
out.
I know it's hard, but it's also, I guess, important that I have a little
Yeah,
bit of an idea.
that's
just
right.
to,
But something
you know,
else you might get from somebody else might tie
That's
it in
true, yeah.
for date.
Yeah.
But Calvinator, I was out 27. I guess Calvinator would be somewhere around the 1945 to 55. I
So
guess
it
when they
was a
were
little
building out
later,
there,
yeah,
they went into
yeah.
a big
Mhm.
program
Mhm.
extension there. And I know I was calling the office. We did business with the superintendent, and then once a week I'd have to go in with the superintendent to Charlie Haddon, who was the manager, and he said to me, he said, I was out around the job this morning, he said, we got to get this thing done. He said, and you haven't got any men working there. Oh, I said, there's 30. He said, there's no such a thing. And I said, well, you asked Mr. Scott, he was the superintendent's name. They were all down in the footings, in the hole, going to work, you see. And then he complained about the cost of ready-mix concrete. This was new to him and that. And I said, well, I figured it out. And I said, have you ever seen, when we were pouring walls over here, I said, we'd have a gang of 7 men. They'd put the gravel in and put the cement in, and they'd pour a piece of wall. Then I said they'd move up 50 feet. But I said the gravel didn't move, it stayed there. So I said we had to hire the truck and the gang and bring it back down with it. None of that with ready mix, you just pour it in and that's it. And he said, that's all right. Do you think it's cheaper? I said, I don't think at all. I said, I know it, I figured it out. And so that was ready mix, and I would think it would be about that time.
Yeah, that's interesting. What about when you were quite young? Do you remember new technology coming into your life in the home? Do you remember radio? Do you remember any new things that...
Well, I remember television. The wife and I had talked it over. That was the London television mostly, and we decided it'd be just as well to leave it, not have one because our kids wouldn't do their homework. So I used to do quite a bit of night work. I used to go back to the office and do quite a bit of night work, and I'd come home maybe 8:30, 8:45, and I'd say, "Where's the kids?" Well, they're out at the neighbors. Oh God! Finally, I found out that they were out there watching television. So I bought a television, and
be in the late 40s, early 50s.
yeah,
probably,
yeah. And they were going to public school at the time.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
Television, and then of course radio. Radio all along before I was married. I guess when I was around about 14, Ron Gerd up on Dundas Street used to run a class at the Y. We were up in the turret in the old Y building on Wellington Street, and that was all dot and dash then. And I know. Well, I was in public school because I invited my Gibbs, this Mr. Gibbs over there. I said that I had a radio, and it was one of these here cat's whiskers on Galena, and you could get music on it from Pittsburgh. And geez, he came over and he sat the whole evening from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock, and I never got a goddamn thing on as far as music was concerned. So I remember that, and I would be somewhere around about. That'd be somewhere around about 1920.
Yeah. You had Mr. Gibbs over?
Yeah,
Oh.
he came over to the house. Of course, he knew my dad, but he came over for the evening to hear this here. I said, I got music on it.
Yeah.
But that night, the music didn't come.
Didn't come.
So I remember that was a Galena, or cat's whiskers, as we used to call them, and with a tuning coil, and then from there on in, the tube came in, and the vacuum tube, and then, they gradually progressed from there. I remember that coming in quite well.
Do you remember medicine when you were younger being very much home remedy? I'm thinking of that kind of technology where people seem to make up their own cures. You didn't have the antibiotics and that sort of thing.
No. I do remember it quite
Do you
well.
remember having to take any terrible stuff when you were younger?
Oh yeah, I had to take compound licorice and Epsom salts and that, and you used to get a dose to you every Saturday night. For some reason or other, Saturday night was the miracle night. And I always remember my dad was in the contracting business with 4 brothers, and on Friday night they'd have their office night, and they'd get together and talk about different facets of the business because they wouldn't get time in the daytime. And then they'd come in and they'd have lunch. Our house was next door. Then they'd come in and have lunch. And this night I was up, and my mother said, "Do you want some coffee?" And I said, "Yes." So I took the coffee, and they used to have, oh my gosh, awful thing called compound licorice. It was a purgative, I guess you call it, or a laxative.
Mhm.
And I tasted, oh, God, that is full of compound liquor, you see. So I switched the cup with my uncle's, one of my uncles, you see. And the next morning he came over, and my mother's name was Liz, and he said, Liz, he said, my God, what did you put in that coffee last night? He said, I was up all night. So I remember that quite well. But the Doc Moore was the family doctor, and he was right on Wellington Street. Let me see. He'd be right in the city center right now. Doc Moore. He was supposed to be one of the best doctors, and Dad doctored with him. And I can remember a little incident coming out. You know, I was about 7 or 8 at the time when they got the house, and I was sick, and I was in bed in the front room, and they'd called him in, and he came down, and he said, tell me what the trouble is. And I said, well, I think I got heart trouble. And he said, well, where does it hurt? And I said, right here. He said, you're absolutely right. He said, every boy's heart is in his stomach. I can remember that to this day. I was about 7 at the time.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And then I went through a treatment of taking your tonsils out by X-ray, Wismar on Queens Ave, around where the Y used to be. And I took about 8 or 10 treatments, and then I didn't figure it was any good, and then I went and had them operated on. But that was a standard procedure to take your tonsils out by exposure to X-ray.
What was that supposed to do? Like loosen them or something, and then they just
Shrink them.
Oh, shrink them.
Yeah, shrink them up.
I see.
Yeah, but it didn't work anyway.
I'm just.
There's a number of little topics here. I know we can talk for hours.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
I'm just going to give you a bunch of little topics, and if you can pull out a little
A little
memory.
answer.
One thing I want to pursue a little further is you said Red Monahan was one of the characters. Do you remember any other people that would be considered, characters in the city, different, unusual, stood out in the crowd, or?
Yeah, we had one here. I knew him real well too. Parsons that owned. He owned a stable out on the corner of Third Street and Dundas Street. He ran racehorses. He owned the hotel. I forget the name of it, down in St. Thomas, the big hotel on the main street. It's demolished now. Alec Parsons, and he was quite a character, with horses and that. And
What made him was he well known for?
oh yeah, he was known all over the place.
What made him? Was it his personality or?
Well, his personality, and he was kind of a rough and ready, and like his horses and that. Nobody could figure out why he did so well with his horses. But I was out there. I don't know, out there in some business or something or other. And he grew oats in flower boxes and fed them to the horse in the middle of the wintertime. And of course, the horse had a head start on these green vitamins, if you like to call it, from what the other horses did when the grass grew. He was one. A Monkey Weir, who was the truant officer in the public schools. He was known all over the place. He was the truant officer. If he'd go down to the shows and watch anybody going into the shows and nab them and grab. And his name, that wasn't his proper name, but that's what he was called. I don't know what his other name was. Monkey Weir.
So he was feared by the. Did kids try to skip school or?
Oh yeah, occasionally. Not so much as they do now,
Not
but they
with him
did. Yeah,
around, eh?
yeah. And he'd go down to the theaters, you see, and he'd stand in the corner and watch them come in and then grab them. I'm talking about elementary schools.
So this was when you were before the war, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, maybe around 1920.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Well, I'd say before that, about 1916 to 1922. Well, that wouldn't be before the First World War, but that's the time it would be. Monkey Weir. Then there was Miss Mulvaney, who was
Spelled?
taught artists, who was an artist in the schools. And she was I don't know whether you're any relation to her. She was, nobody liked her. She was a typical old maid, and she'd come in, and if any piece of art, a kid put out a piece of good art, well, it isn't too bad, and so forth. But you ask any kid in the city of London, at that age, and I'm talking about when I was about 8 to 12 in school, Miss Mulvaney, she was a noted character all over the whole city, because she covered the whole city then.
She went from school to school.
Oh yeah, from school to school, yeah.
And
And there's
you
monkey.
couldn't please her.
Huh?
You couldn't please
Oh
her.
God, no. And she'd say, "What's that?" And you'd say, "It's a tulip." And she said, "Well, it looks more like a carrot to me," or something like that. She was known as that. Nobody ever did any good. But this Monkey Weir was all over the city too, because of schools. They didn't have that many schools in the city.
How do you spell Mulvaney? How do you spell?
Mulvenny, or one N and a Y. Mulvaney.